On today's show, the Cavs are going to Paris, plus next season. It's not that far away, so let's look ahead. Let's dive in on a new Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Chris Manning. Evan, do your bit.
He's back, ladies and gentlemen. He's back. He's back from places unseen. Beautiful, I believe, Columbus, Ohio. But he's back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. When you go away for a couple of days for work, it feels like a while. And say, Levy, here we are. I'm Chris Manning. That is Evan Dammarell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. If you're in Cleveland, hope you didn't get hit in the rain or the thunderstorm, because that was gnarly. All right. Fun show today. We're going to do a little more Summer League stuff tomorrow to give you a little Locked On Cavs Saturday edition. We're going to start with the Cavs. They're going to play a game against the Brooklyn Nets in Paris. So we're going to talk about what other cities, we would like to see an NBA game in. And my list is basically cities I would like to theoretically travel to. And then later in the show, we're going to talk about what we're going to look ahead to next season. Some little things that are getting us juiced as we are 8 weeks or so away from training camp opening, which still feels like far away, but not. But Evan, the Cavs are playing the Brooklyn Nets in Paris. This will be the second NBA game in Paris. We had the Pistons and the Bulls last year. This is cool. I gotta say, I think the idea of them doing this as like one-offs, I think it's really cool. All the behind-the-scenes stuff they had last year looked really fun. I'm all for this. And if you're the team that gets it right before they take Victor Wembanyama to Paris in 2024, 2025, that's not a bad gig. Not a bad gig if you can get it. You can go spend a couple of days in the City of Lights.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it was in the ether for a little while now. We may have touched on this a while back.
I can't pronounce the name of the paper, but a very large French newspaper that specializes in sports coverage broke this a little bit ago, and the NBA and the Cavs just took a little bit longer to announce it for whatever reason.
I mean, it's fine. You probably have to get everything ready, make sure everything logistically is able to line up. You are dealing with international stuff. They're more than just national stuff. But I joked at the time, I think I called it the Timothy Luau Cabarro Cup, and it can still be that between Cleveland and Brooklyn. But yeah, I agree. I always think it's fun to see these international games. Like, it was fun when Chicago and Detroit did it not too long ago. And it's fun to kind of see a team that you and I cover take on the international stage, at least. And I mean, I was joking with my fiance about this because we're planning on doing our honeymoon like about a month or so after the Cavs go to Paris. And I jokingly said, like, hey, I may go to France in January. It's the same day as her birthday. Miss her birthday entirely. And I'll just link up with you in Italy for our honeymoon in February. Is that cool with you? And I slept on the couch that evening. But yeah, it's basketball more and more so like is becoming such an international sport. And I think that's a smart way to navigate things business wise, especially just because the NFL is king in the United States. And I don't think it's just really, it's just not going to be realistic to like compete with the NFL in terms of just like viewership and coverage. So if you expand the game internationally, especially when a lot of your players are at least the faces of the league or international stars, whether it's Luka, Giannis, hopefully Victor Wembanyama, and plenty of other guys.
Victor who?
Wembanyama.
Wembanyama.
Chris, the French pronunciation is Wembanyama. He goes by Wemby for short.
Okay, I'm just saying how the ESPN said it. So here we go. Continue.
It's not the first time ESPN's been wrong. So, but either way, this is cool for the game. I agree. Like, if they're able to bring the Spurs internationally, that'd be fun at some point too. Like, you really look at the scope of just French players in the NBA, and there are some notable guys. Obviously, there's Wemby, there is Rudy Gobert. I think Nick Batum is one of the more recent ones. Then you guys even have like Killian Hayes, who may not pan out in terms of his like draft projections, but like he's still a French prospect that made it into the NBA. Tony Parker is like one of the greatest examples in terms of just like one of the greatest French NBA players of all time as well. So it's cool just to see the NBA kind of just have a bit of a foothold in a region where there are some pretty strong roots in their league in terms of just like that common thread between the NBA and France. And yeah, it's just, as a Frenchman, I am biased, but it's cool to see the Cavs kind of go onto that stage.
All right, here, give me a city, Evan, that if you were gonna pick another city that you would want an NBA game to be in, just give me a city. Give me a city that would be on your list.
Adamstown and the Pitcairn Islands, considered the most remote city in the world, with a resident of 56.
Okay,
people.
see, now you're just being obtuse for the sake of being obtuse. You're not being like that. That's like, what's the point of that? What's the point of that?
Well, there's also Ituqorasuarmiit in Greenland, which is considered the northernmost city, and it looks stunning in terms of the views. But like, in all seriousness, I know Japan, or Tokyo rather, they've done preseason games in Japan. They've done preseason games in China. I think India would be cool. Like if they did some preseason games in like India, whether it's like New Delhi or Bengal, like India is one of the biggest countries in the world. And I think there is a little bit of a connection of like Indian players and just panning out in like Sim Bular is like the most recent example I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more recent examples, of course, but India would be a cool place to see. Plus, like, it's just, culturally, there's a lot of different ways you can go about this, because like it's cool just to see these different like slices of the world on a geopolitical stage that we don't really get to kind of see perspective wise, because we're kind of in our own little bubble in the United States. So yeah, I'm going to throw India out there. Just like as the nation of India, you can pick a spot. It's a heavily populated country to begin with. I think you're okay no matter where you end up, but India would be my pick.
So it's good that you don't actually want to pick the country where there's like 50 people.
That was just, I literally Googled most remote country or cities in the world, and Adamstown, congratulations with your 56 residents. I'm going to see if this is how recent this is, but like do Delhi or Bengal. That'd be fun.
All right, so I have 5 that I would throw in the list.
I have others. I want to bounce it off you, but I saw your list.
What?
And I'm like, Well, first off, Adamstown actually has 47 people as of January 2020. So, but Oslo doesn't surprise me. Riff on it.
Yeah, I just want to go to. I dislike Oslo. I would, for me, to get to like that would just be cool. I like Oslo. Buenos Aires is on there because you have the Argentinian history with Manu Ginobili. You have a pipeline of NBA players to come from there. It's also South America. I think you could do there, like Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I think you could do something really cool. Then you go to Serbia, like the Serbian crowd you see. I'm sure people on like Instagram or TikTok have seen the clip of Nikola Jokic asking him about Bud, and he's like, "Brother, I've played in Serbia." Those crowds are raucous and awesome and nothing like we have in the States. Sign me up for like a crazy game like that, see how people would react to it. I think that would be really cool. And obviously, like, let's go to Jokic's own country. Let's go to where the region of Europe where Luka Doncic and this pipeline of amazing Balkan NBA players has come from in the last 20 years. Like that sounds awesome to me. London, it's London. That's a European metropolis. And then let's go down under. Let's go to Melbourne or let's go to Sydney. There's a ton of Australian NBA players that have come in recent years. There's a pipeline of that for a long time now. There's more and more talent coming from there. That's just like another place. Japan would also be would be like my 6. I was gonna say like another city, like let's do a game in Tokyo. That would be the other one to me.
I actually have another one, thinking about it just out loud, because I thought, do you remember many, many moons ago when I believe it was North Carolina and Michigan State, so like Harrison Barnes and Draymond Green, to age this a little bit, but they played on the aircraft carrier in the Bay in San Diego. Do you remember that? Like,
yeah,
obviously,
I remember the college tournament, yeah.
Yeah, like optics wise, I just don't think that would ever work, especially in the NBA, to get players to play outdoors. I was just thinking, like, because again, I was scrolling through remote cities, and like one of the more remote cities is actually one of the best places to see the Northern Lights. I'm just like, oh, that'd be cool. And then I'm scrolling further, and like, oh, another good spot to see the Northern Lights is just British Columbia or Vancouver. And I'm like, the NBA going back to Vancouver would be kind of neat, especially if it was, I don't know how well received the Grizzlies would be, considering they left, but based on just like what is publicly known, or at least what I can research, like the Grizzlies weren't like the most embraced team when they're in Vancouver. But it would be cool to see the NBA maybe embrace Canada a little bit more, maybe do a bit of a Canadian countrywide tour, because I was talking to some folks who just like cover the Raptors. Like the Raptors are Canada's team in terms of just like the NBA, but I think just like tapping into maybe that aspect of them being Canada's team and letting them visit other locations other than Toronto would be kind of cool to see.
All right, up next, we're going to look ahead to next season. A lot to think about, a lot to dive into, but we'll dive into that coming up after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount and bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All of that, by the way, is on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet MLB on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we're back here. Let's go to next season and look ahead as far as things we're looking forward to. I mean, here's my first one. The offensive evolution that I think has to come based on the roster changes we've seen. I think particularly when you bring in Max Strus, when you bring in George Niang, and you bring in guys that just let it fly from three, and you bring in a guy like Strus in particular, who I think is probably going to start at the three and takes catch and shoot threes at an insanely high volume, one of the highest rates of catch and shoot 3-point guys you have in the NBA right now. Your offense, I think, is just going to look a little bit different, and I'm curious to see how they accommodate that spacing.
Yeah, I am curious about this. I talked about this earlier in the week, just through the lens of like Isaac Okoro's growth and development. It's pretty clear the Cavs prioritize shooting this offseason, whether it's Strus, whether it's George Niang, Ty Jerome as well. And then you obviously have heavier hitters like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland on your roster. They do have two open roster spots right now, so we can touch on that maybe a little bit. Maybe they go find like a cheap like bargain bin shooter just as like a break glass in case of emergency. I Sam Merrill's on the team as well technically, so he falls in that list, just maybe at the very, very far ends of the rotation. But I am interested to see how the rotation itself fleshes out, because I agree with you. I said this on Monday's show, but Strus is for sure at least penciled in heading into camp in my eyes as the starting small forward for the Cavs. I think maybe it's going to be a bit of a competition between him and Okoro, because he does have the history of being the starting small forward, and Bickerstaff knows him a bit better. But I just think the shooting upside alone is just too worthwhile, and just him being that Strus being that fifth banana next to a starting five of Garland, Mobley, Mitchell, and Allen. Like, that spacing is so key for a lot of what that team wants to do offensively, that just having him be him as in Strus again, to be that guy to kind of unlock things to get the game going, is going to be beneficial. And then I think that empowers Karis LeVert, who I would assume is your sixth man. Niang is going to be in the rotation. And then it's going to be a bit of a weird amalgamation of minutes, because Bickerstaff is a creature of habit who likes to go 8 or 9 players deep. Never really goes 10, but I would imagine Rubio, Jerome, Okoro, maybe even Damian Jones is in the mix for some fringe minutes as well too. And I'm curious to see how it all pans out. Do the Cavs sacrifice defense for more offensive bump, or do they try to stagger some of the minutes while keeping with some of the concepts and identities and schemes that were functional and just kind of led to wins for them last year?
I think more than anything else, I don't think you're doing it right if you bring in someone like Max Strus who can shoot off of handoffs, who can come off the screens, who can shoot in a bunch of different ways. I just can't imagine there's a world where you are in a situation where he doesn't, even if he's not your number one lead option, if the way bringing him in doesn't change you a little bit. That more than what the rotation looks like, more than all of that, I think we can kind of guess it, minute totals and some of the lineups and that kind of stuff. I think that's a little more predictable to me and easier to project out than, okay, how does the offense actually structurally change a little bit with Strus in there to be someone that can give you something you did not have from a skill set perspective last year?
Yeah, and that's the thing with Max Strus and what he provides as like a core value. Like that shooting aspect is so underrated, and it's something the Cavs really, really needed in the postseason and also heading into this season, because I have some questions. Like, does Karis LeVert sustain like this weird as you pointed out, just like statistical anomaly where he shot way more threes than he did middies last year. And does that continue, or does LeVert kind of fall back into habits now that has some guaranteed money, at least for the next 2 years under his belt? So that's a curious thing. Like, does Darius Garland take a leap? Does Donovan Mitchell kind of work through some of his wrinkles and maybe some of the lumps that we saw really become glaring on the biggest stage against the Knicks? So just Strus, what he does alleviates a lot of the pressure for some of these guys. And also it's so fascinating. Like, I'm not saying like all the expectations and all the pressures on Max Strus's shoulders, but he is really a key piece in just unlocking so much for this Cavs team. Especially if, and I forgot to mention, like, even if Evan Mobley's shot, like, isn't there, like, if he's not hitting 38% of his three-pointers on, like, 4 attempts to open the season, and he's still kind of a work in progress there, having that shooting depth and dimension that Strus provides, and also Niang and Jerome as well, like, it's criminally underrated in just how the Cavs function as a semi-antiquated team that is looking to add modern touches on the edges.
If Evan Mobley showed up to making 4 threes a game and shooting 38%, we're putting him an All-NBA.
No. 38.9% on 4 attempts per game, I should say.
Either way, we're still putting him. We're putting him an All-NBA team if he goes from. Let me see what he was shooting from 3 last year. That would be like. That's like an insane leap. Even if I would even just say if he's 33% on like 2 a game, like that would be like.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he needs like. Unless like he has like a pretty insane leap, like he's gonna be a bit of a work in progress still as a perimeter shooter, and like you gotta find sources elsewhere to kind of supplement it.
I'm just imagining him going from 1.3 threes a game to like almost 5 a game, and going from 21.6% to like 38%. That would be just like we're putting him all NBA. That's where we're at. If that happens, we'll talk about Mobley in the third segment, but that would be like. That would be one of like the biggest 5 NBA stories in the league if that were what happened with Mobley, or even if he took that many a game. That would be wild.
It would be.
I don't think my brain could compute that. Quick on Niang, I would say just with that, I really am curious to see, Evan, how much they try to play him at the 3, or if they do just treat him as a 4.
That is an interesting like thought. Because he does have that weird tweener status where he's functional as a shooter. But yeah, he could be a 3, he could be a 4. That just goes solely next to Mobley and Allen, or one of Mobley or Allen. And then maybe there are lineups where like the Cavs go really big. Like, let's say Karis LeVert at the 1. Strus at the 2, just because there's a little bit of size difference there. Then you go like Niang, Mobley, Allen, just go like extra beefy. Like, that could be a fun lineup, but do the Cavs feel comfortable enough putting Niang as a 3 and maybe being kind of picked on by the stronger perimeter threats that some teams possess?
All right, after this, let's talk about Evan Mobley, the excitement of him for next season, and what the evolution might be. Evan, when you think about Evan Mobley's next season, what's the first thing that you are intrigued to see, that you are looking forward to see what it looks like on opening night? Not in the preseason when it's like half speed. Sometimes it feels like opening night, everything's on the table. What are you most excited to see with Evan Mobley when we get to next season?
Well, maybe not even opening night, just because it's hard to get a full litmus test of it. Let's say a couple weeks into the season. Heck, maybe even in this regular season tournament, like the Cavs end up trying to be competitive in that. Like, do we have enough data to say that Evan Mobley is comfortable handling the offense? Because I am team handle, but I am leaning towards team shot as well when it comes to Mobley. But like, he's so still trying to find his way offensively as a player that I'm curious to see what is the big change or addition he makes. Because defensively, I'm more than confident in saying he's fine. But like, does he follow more of like a Giannis path and just like completely focus on getting bulked up and maybe just being like a defensive monster that has not much of a perimeter shooting game, but can give you a little bit of everything else on offense and just also just be like a dynamic threat in offense? Or do the Cavs kind of zag a little bit and just let him follow his own trajectory, where maybe it's more like an Anthony Davis or maybe even like a Brook Lopez as well, where it's a little bit more leaning towards like 3-point shooting and less so on the handle? Like, I want to see what Mobley is, and people who listen to the show a lot probably get sick of hearing me say this, but like I like to have like a substantial slice of data, like make a jump on it, but it's year 3. We have to figure out what Evan Mobley can be as a player. Can he make a jump on offense to maybe leapfrog one of Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland to be like the second offensive threat in this team? Or is he comfortable being the third guy who sometimes floats between third and fourth, depending on the kind of night Jared Allen's having?
Yeah, one of the things that I think with Mobley that I think will be really telling is how strong he looks. I think if he shows up and we see him kind of handling some of the 5 stuff and we see him absorbing some of that, I think that level up will be interesting because I think that unlocks some other ways you could play. That's going to give you more minutes that will give you more room for Niang and Strus and LeVert, maybe for Okoro if you want to get really small. And I think last year showed us that Mobley at the 5 is a really successful way to build out lineups. And it was also notable last year that he really settled in as a really good lob guy, as a really good lob threat, especially with Darius Garland. It wasn't like a full superseding Jared Allen, but like there was a little bit of that there, and the overlap favored Mobley. And I'm also curious to see how he handles the short roll a little bit this year. That was, to me, an area in the playoffs where he looked a little bit overwhelmed. And if this is someone who evolves in that spot in year 3 and is more comfortable in that spot, there's a lot on the table there for him to cook.
Yeah, there definitely is. The point about him feeling more comfortable, maybe this is part of the path where he bulks up and just becomes even more shredded. I don't think like he's going to get like massive. Like he's not going to be like Kendrick Perkins big or something like that coming in the next season. But like if he just becomes more toned and just much more solid, and I think also just handles that new like level of strength to not foul often. Like I think that's going to be a bit of a learning curve for him too, just because if he's getting bigger as a player, like he's going to have to become comfortable in his body. But not the small ball, because if the Cavs do view him as a 5 long term, but the small ball lineups you can put around him do make some fun wrinkles for the Cavs, because when Allen was out with that eye laceration, they played Mobley at the 5 almost exclusively at times. Like there was a bit of an offensive jump. Like it was only a handful of games. So like you notice, like, yeah, the Cavs were running a lot more in fast break. They were doing a lot more just like fast break stuff in general. I know Allen noted like when he came back from the injury, he's just like, yeah, big guys don't really like to run so much because they're too busy covering for their guards defensively, as like a bit of a joke. But Mobley's interesting in the fact that like he is comfortable getting out on the fast break, and also maybe that is, like as you said, like a way to unlock not just like different lineups, but also maybe, hey, does Evan Mobley act as the initiator on the fast break? Does he feel comfortable enough dribbling up in transition and kicking the ball ahead to a streaking like a Okoro? Or maybe he finds Max Strus who returns to the perimeter, even Ty Jerome as well. Like there's a lot of ways you could explore this, and yeah, Mobley at the 5 could be fun. Maybe again, he's such like a fascinating player, because I don't want to say like what he can be as a finished prospect, because I don't know what he can be as a finished prospect, but we'll have a pretty better understanding of maybe what he will be long term, just based on like his tentpole growth, because again, it's tried and true, but like year 3 is usually your players have like a bit of a leap professionally, and you start to get a clear picture of maybe what their overall potential is as a player too.
Give me one last thing you're looking forward to for next season. We'll do a lot more of these as we get closer and do season preview stuff, but give me something else you're looking forward to.
The backup or the 4th guard in the rotation, because you'd assume it's obviously Mitchell, Garland, LeVert. Do they lean on Ricky Rubio to start the year, or do they look at Ty Jerome and say, okay, you're a combo guard, but you know how to run an offense to some basic ability, but you have that shooting bump Rubio just doesn't currently. So well, what does that look like? And also, how, just to go hand in hand with that, like how deep does JV go into his rotation? Because the Cavs did add some depth this offseason. Like how do they figure this all out, or do we see a little bit more of the same with some slight changes sprinkled in to open the year?
I'm going to give you a guess right now of the rotation. I'm just going to look at this and riff live, and we're going to figure out, not in terms of minutes and starters, but like I'm just going to give you the 10 guys. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Max Strus, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, George Niang, Ricky Rubio, maybe Okoro is the 9th. And that leaves Dean Wade on the fringe. That leaves Damian Jones on the fringe. I think they'll get minutes I think both of them could get minutes from time to time. I think Ty Jerome is kind of on the inside looking out a little bit. I think some of this could be matchup dependent, and I don't really see a path. It's for, I don't think Bates is going to play as a rookie. I don't think Isaiah Mobley is going to play much. I think it's kind of those guys as of right now. I don't think Sam Merrill is going to play very much.
No, and I know people were making the case for Sam Merrill. I talked about this on the show, actually, as I was kind of closing the book on Summer League. Merrill does present a need for the Cavs, or he does answer a need that's currently on the Cavs in terms of shooting, but you brought in 2 shooters that'll definitely be in your rotation. We agree on that with Strus and Niang. And then, you even have Ty Jerome, you have Mitchell, you have Garland, you even have LeVert, who may have a bit of a bump, too. There's just a lot of dudes ahead of Sam Merrill. He's a guy who is too good for the G League, probably not good enough to be a consistent member of an NBA rotation, but is a guy where if you have injuries or you want to give guys a night off, I think he'd be comfortable giving you 20, 25 minutes in that stretch, just playing in for somebody else's minutes for a 48-minute game. But rotation-wise, we'll do this live, like you said. I think we agree on the starting 5, so I'll just save time on that. I think it'll be LeVert, Niang. I lean towards Okoro as that 8th man, just because you maybe having some shooting around him makes him a little easier to work with and work out those wrinkles. Plus, point of attack defense is his greatest attribute. You may need that some nights. And then that 9th spot, I think they go Rubio to open the season, but if Rubio still just doesn't look right, or if he really muddles up lineups because of the lack of shooting threat that he provides, you look more towards Jerome in that spot. And at that point, I just think the 9th man could be, as you said, it could be based on need. Are they playing a bigger team? Maybe Damian Jones gets those minutes that evening, or do they want to play a bigger team but they have enough size with Mobley and Allen, but they want to add a little bit more size, but also have that shooting touch? Yeah, maybe Dean Wade, if his shot is still there, but it's clunky. The Cavs probably have 8 dudes that I feel pretty comfortable in saying will be playing for them to start the season, just on a consistent night-to-night basis, but when you start to expand things out a bit, you can make an argument for a lot of those guys, but it's not really an argument that's worth getting blue in the face over, because this is a guy that's going to get 10, 15 minutes a night at most.
Let's end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. Back at you tomorrow. We're going to talk about Cavs Summer League guys, so Travers, Bates, Mobley, Craig Porter Jr., and not just look at next year, but we're going to look 3 years out. Who is most likely to be a rotation guy? Not in the immediate future, but in the near future. Join in for that tomorrow. Talk to you then.